So this is a spinner bait, and it's one of my favorite lures to use. It works really well when it's windy outside and partially cloudy, but usually when the water is really rough on the surface, if you just cast it out and reel it in just right underneath the surface. You can also fish it like a yo-yo. You can wind the reel a little bit and let it drop to the bottom of the pond and then reel it up again. But it has these blades on here that create a flash in the water, and what this lure is doing is imitating a bait fish. The colors, usually in murky water, I like to use bright colors. When the water's a little bit clearer like it is today, white works well, but this is probably my go-to bait as far as colors. It's what is called chartreuse, yellow, and white. And red is also good to have on a lure. It simulates the bait fish bleeding, and that of course attracts attention from the bass. And I also like to put a trailer hook on it. A lot of times if you're not paying attention, you can catch this trailer hook in a log or lily pad, but sometimes the fish, when they're not as active, they'll swim up to the lure and not necessarily swallow the lure, but maybe just grab a hold of the skirt. So this trailer hook helps with catching fish. So I like to use a bait cast reel. This is something that really early on as a kid that I started fishing. This is one of my earlier reels. This was actually signed by Jimmy Houston, but then I decided to use the reel afterwards and the signature rubbed off, but he signed it in this area right here of the reel. The key with a bait caster is you always have to make sure you keep your thumb on the spool, so as you're casting it and before the line hits the water, you want to make sure that you move your thumb to the spool, or else you'll get what is called the bird's nest or backlash, and it's really difficult afterwards to untie that. But just make sure you keep your thumb on the spool. A lot of the newer reels have magnets in them, probably a little bit more sophisticated than this one. But just starting out using this, you want to make sure that the magnet is all the way up towards the top. And the other key with a bait caster is you want to make sure that when you cast it, that it's sideways like this. A lot of people will cast it upright like this, but when you cast it, make sure that it's sideways, and it helps with keeping that backlash from happening. But I'm going to go ahead and cast this right now, and it'll hit the water here. You can see it flashing. You also want to make sure that you fish it near structure, so there's logs in the water right here, lily pads. But really this you just have to keep on moving around, casting it, and waiting for a fish to strike. So we definitely have a little bit of wind. Oh, I just got a bite. So here we are. Pretty good sized bass here. Yeah, that was right as soon as I took it almost out of the water. Let's see here if you can stop shaking. So you want to make sure that you grip the largemouth bass with using your thumb. You want to hold the lower lip, and that's actually going to lock the jaw, and so it's a little easier to get the hook out of the mouth. But let me unhook this here. Yep, and the trailer one in it right now. So especially in a warm day like this, you want to get the fish back in the water as quick as possible. So we'll go ahead and just release him back in the water, and it's good to go. So we're moving to another log and see if we have any luck here. But structure is anything, like I was mentioning, logs, docks, rocks, lily pads, weed beds. The one thing when you do catch a fish that because the last fish that I caught was near the shore, couldn't really show you, but you want to make sure that you set the hook so you're lifting up the the whole rod and reel, basically setting the hook in the fish's mouth. And a lot of times if you don't do that, and I know from experience and making that mistake, that I don't set the hook and the fish, you know, immediately gets off the line if it's barely hooked. So you always want to make sure that you lift up on the rod pretty fast, depending on the size of the fish, of course. If it's a little tiny bluegill, you know, you don't have to set the rod that hard, but if it's a bigger bass, you really want to make sure you set that hook. So we'll give it another try. See if there's something hiding on this log here. Yep, there we go, another catch. Yeah, so the spinnerbait bait is working really well today. It's windy and they seem to like it, so it's imitating those bait fish. So this is a little bit smaller one. But same thing, you make sure you grab hold of the lower lip, and sometimes it gets caught in there. This one, oh, got it out and it went back in, so that happens sometimes. So, yeah, we'll make sure you get the fish in the water. So the bass is an ambush predator, meaning that they like to hide out on structure, which I mentioned previously. So this deck right here is a great place for fish to hang out. I don't know if you can see them in the water, but there's bluegill, it looks like, in there, and probably a few bass as well, just kind of hiding in the shade. So shade is actually a really good structure as well. Nice bright afternoon like today is. Shade is a great place to fish. And always fish the windy side too. So wind is going to push the bait fish towards the shore, and the larger bass will be there to feed. So always fish the windy side. And the saying, winds from the east, fish bite the least. Winds from the west, fish bite the best. Winds from the south, blow the lures or bait in their mouth. And winds from the north, you better go forth. So I'm going to try to cast under the dock here. There we go. See if something... And sometimes too, you want to make sure that you cast, if there's a log or rock nearby, sometimes you want to cast over that. Which that didn't work too well here. Cast over it, and then I'll just kind of right on the side, I'll see if something goes after it. Oh. I'm catching the dock more than fish. So just casting right on the side of the deck here. See if there's something hiding in that shade. Something's running, swimming after it. Looks like a bluegill. So yeah, hopefully you can see in the video, but you can see the shade and just kind of paralleling that. Kind of scaring the bluegill there. So yeah, cast beyond your target area and just reel it in, especially when the water is this clear. And that if it drops right on them, it may scare them a little bit, but fish, a couple of the bass were roaming before, so they were kind of out of the shade from underneath the deck here. Let's see if I can. If there's anything that goes after it here. Definitely having better luck in the other pond there. Just kind of parallel the deck and the shade, and try the other side. So make sure, yeah, if your lure gets full of aquatic vegetation, a lot of people will call it seaweed. I still call it seaweed, but of course it's not the sea. Make sure you remove all that, because it can interfere with the blades moving, and it can interfere with the way that lure runs in the water. So we moved to a different log, kind of the same area that we first started out at, and we'll see if there's something on this log right here. Oh, looks like something went after it. Yeah, a lot of the bass are hiding on the logs today. And they're an ambush predator, so that means that they just kind of hide, conceal themselves on the log. And if a bait fish or bluegill swim by, they'll swim out and grab it. But days like today, where there's bright sun, the fish are really glued to the structure. On days that it's cloudy or in the morning when the sun is not up, they're going to be moving around more, so it's a little bit easier to fish. But sometimes days like today, you gotta land it right on their nose. And a lot of times you just keep on casting to the same area. I've casted 20 times on one particular log, and then the 20th time the fish bites it. Let's try this log again. Yep, there's a fish that just jumped. Yep, he definitely got a bite. So he was further under, and I wasn't paying attention. Let's see if we can. So hopefully it's a good night fish in the night. Seems like it will be. As soon as the wind picked up, fish definitely become more active. He said no thank you. So I was running it on the surface. Now I'm kind of dropping the lure a little bit further in the water. I think it's about 10 feet deep in here. So I'm going a few more feet down from the surface just to see if there's any fish below this log. So, but yeah, when the wind it's this windy, the spinnerbait works pretty good. Like I say, you just have to keep it moving now, because a lot of times if you run the bait into a log, that's good, because it's imitating a dying bait fish, and that's kind of an easy meal for the fish. So the one thing with the trailer hook, though, is sometimes it does get stuck on the log. So let's try a different log right here. In the water, so that's good. Let's try. Yeah, cast beyond the target, which I did not do there. Okay. A lot of times with the spinnerbait, you're looking for those active fish. So this is like my fish locating lure, I call it. So once I find a fish, sometimes there's other ones hiding on the same log, and I'll move to a finesse bait, which is like a plastic worm. So we are trying to fish a couple of rocks that are in the water. See if there's any bass on them. Oh, looks like something went after it. Or it could just be ran into the side of a rock. sometimes if you speed up the retrieve, I know I was fishing it slow there for a while, it may trigger a reaction strike. So just kind of change up the speed of the lure. Depends on the water temperature too. Obviously the water is really warm today. If it's, you know, cooler, if it's spring or fall, the water's cooler. Obviously I won't be winding the lure in this fast, but today it's extremely warm. It's in the afternoon, which isn't the best for summer fishing. But just keep on moving the lure and try different places. Kind of an impatient fisherman. I don't like to stay in one spot for too long. When I go out fishing some of the lakes, I am constantly trolling. So doing the same thing I'm doing here, just running the spinnerbait every direction. But usually when there's no wind and there's bright blue skies, I'll just run the finesse baits, which is the plastic worm. So, and I'll fish a little bit slower because the fish are a little less active.